Good afternoon, and welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator for Trusts Unlimited, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call, particularly those of you calling in for the first time and those that will be listening to the replay over the next 24 to 48 hours. We like to move quickly through these calls and bottom line the information for you. Ordinarily, our call involves a discussion of the situation in Iraq, a review of the turnkey program we've put in place to assist you, and then we go to a Q&A. There will be a short call here today. For those of you that have been kind enough to listen, my daughter was in a rather severe car accident a couple of weeks ago, and I'm visiting her, so I'm not in front of my desktop. I'm sitting here with a laptop computer, and I'm frankly a little bit nervous about using it. I'm an analog guy in the digital world, so that's one of the reasons why I'm afraid I'll accidentally cut everyone off if I try to utilize this thing. But anyway, I do want to get into what's going on. There is a lot of information to discuss here today, so let's go ahead and get into that. Before we do, for our newer callers, I strongly suggest if you will take the time after listening to this call to go to our call of December 1st of last year, 2021. It has a complete overview of the program we've put in place to assist you. I think there's a lot of information there for you. I'm going to be leaving this evening to head back home so I can handle the calls that I get usually after our Wednesday call. That's when we get a glut of questions and orders for our trust package. And so Thursday and Friday is usually dedicated to doing that. And I will be back later this evening so that I can assist those that do need assistance. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the situation in Iraq because the news continues to be good. First, let me mention the Sadrist, al-Sadr, and his movement, as I'm sure you're aware, managed to form a coalition which gave them a majority in the parliament, and they're moving forward with the formation of the government. Now, the estimated time frame for that was from the 9th to the 15th. The fact that that's been delayed is, of course, of no surprise to anyone that's been involved in this for any length of time. It largely had to do with a lot of bogus complaints that went to the Supreme Court. But the Sadrist released a statement saying that they are proceeding with the formation of the government, and they went on to praise the judiciary for their integrity and their independence, i.e. not giving any of these ridiculous complaints any credence. I also note that last week that the Prime Minister had a meeting with the U.S. ambassador where they expressed a desire to continue to cooperate with mutual respect for each other's sovereignty. So, and that had to do with the military's departure, the U.S. military's departure from Iraq on a sort of a pragmatic basis. So that's good news as well. We also know that as part of the process of complaints from the losing side, the Iranians and the State or Rule of Law Party and the Islamic Dawah Party are all issuing statements trying to protect al-Maliki. I guess they're anticipating that since he will clearly not be the Prime Minister, he might be subject to arrest as the release of the files is made public. So that's actually good news, too, because the further that guy is away from making decisions, the better off for the country and certainly those of us that are holding the currencies. Now, last week I did touch on some of what I do consider legitimate concerns about what could postpone the reinstatement and revaluation of the Iraqi dinar. One of the issues was the money supply. I touched on that. Another issue was that they didn't have sufficiently diverse economy. I touched on that. Now one of the issues that's being raised is that Iraq's currency is not within the IMF 2% rate. Between the official CBI rate and the street rate. Now, I don't think that's going to be an impediment to a revaluation. It's something they'd like to see happen. In other words, they'd like to see the official rate and the street rate to be only 2% or less apart from one another. I don't see that as being a roadblock, and the IMF is known for giving drop-dead dates and issuing certain standards conduct that are not met, and they go ahead and proceed and do what they say they're going to do. The reason I think that these arguments are all going to fall away is for things that we can see going on that are concrete. These are not opinion, these are fact. Fact number one, the CBI is destroying the 3-0 currency. Fact number two, Iraq is involved in negotiations with a number of countries in the Middle East and Europe and around the world to establish mutual bank branches. And there simply would be no reason to do that if they're not going to reinstate and revalue their currency. Now, there is the possibility that there could be an initial step of going back to the 1180 rate from the 1450 rate. But even if that were to occur, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to reinstitute and revalue. It just might be a preliminary step that they may take. Now, the CBI has released a statement, and they said that they pledged to restore the price of the dollar to its previous era and to return to the glory days. Well, the previous era was before the currency, the Iraqi Dinar, went into the IMF program rate, which is north of $3. It's not the 1180 rate that was dropped to the 1450 rate last year. So, once again, the things that they are doing are all moving in the direction of a reinstatement and revaluation, and it theoretically could come at any time. I know in the Kuwaiti situation, it just happened. It wasn't a situation where, well, Kuwait announced that they're going to come out of the program rate, and it's going to be on such and such a date, and it's going to be at such and such a rate. It just happened. People weren't even aware of it, and I think that's probably what's going to happen here. Now, next week there will be a full call, and in that call I'm going to be addressing the new digital currency that the Treasury Department has announced. I'll be discussing the Federal Reserve, which is in fact a central bank, and I'll be discussing in more detail how our trusts, in addition to protecting those of you that have these currencies, are going to help to protect and even restore the constitutional rights that the current United States government has been trampling on for the last year. And I do want to touch on the digital currency in more detail next week, but here is the situation with the digital currency, and this is just another reason for us to get our money out of currencies and into hard assets. Now, the hard currency we have now is still in your possession and control. There was a brief period of time where the government thought about going to a rainbow currency. That is, every $1, $5, $10, all of the different bills would be different colors, and then there'd be a drop-dead date. You'd have to turn in your hard currency in order to exchange it for the rainbow currency, or it would be invalid. And they've just decided to dispense with that with the technology as it is today to go to a digital currency. And, of course, their argument, and it's always the lie, that's all the central banks do, lie, is that this is going to be safe. It's not going to be safe. They're going to have control of the currency because they're going to be in possession of it. It's digital. That means they can establish the rules for your liquidity. It also means that a digital currency could be subject to a cyber attack or even an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse weapon. And I wouldn't put it past any government to allow such a thing to occur in order to, quote-unquote, collect and ultimately control wealth. So this may sound like tinfoil hat stuff, but everything they're doing is trying to federalize what we have, our form of federalism. They're trying to federalize everything. And these people that are in charge right now are also globalists, meaning they have no problem with subordinating our sovereignty to unelected international collection of bureaucrats. So the only way we can protect ourselves is through the establishment of trust and transitioning to hard assets. Now, before I go, I touch on this every once in a while, but I think it's important to review it. I want to talk about why, in my opinion, the revaluation of the Iraqi dinar is only a matter of when and not if. Iraq, per square mile, may be the richest country in the world. And they talk a lot about how Iraq needs to diversify revenue, its economic revenue and economic base. But let's look at these various sectors. Let's look, for example, at industry. And we don't think of Iraq as a nation of industry. But remember, they're in the Tigris-Euphrates River Delta. So for thousands of years, that silt has traveled down into that area, meaning that it's rich in industrial and precious metals, and it can be easily mined. We also know that Iraq has the second largest known sulfur reserves in the Middle East. Why is that important? Because sulfur is a critical component for the application of any manner of industrial production. We also know that Iraq is the second largest known oil reserves and that their oil is the sweetest crude. What does that mean? It means that their crude oil has the lowest sulfur content. So we have a country that has the second largest known sulfur reserves and at the same time has the sweetest crude, meaning it has the lowest sulfur content. Well, why is that important? It's important because with the lower sulfur content, it's easier to refine their oil for all of its purposes. Now, only 1/3 of refined petroleum is used in the combustion engine. The other 2/3 is necessary and used for the production of glass, plastic, textiles, rubbers, electronics, and all of the nanotechnologies like the phone you're listening on. There is simply not enough wind and solar in the universe to produce one smartphone. It requires petroleum. And one other thing about petroleum, which is constantly referred to as a fossil fuel. Why do we assume that's the case? Because you go all the way back to the late 60s, early 70s, when the Rockefellers perpetuated the lie that oil is a remnant of a fossil fuel, dead dinosaurs. Not true. Petroleum, which is found in the strata of the dinosaur age, is in fact a mineral, a reproducing mineral, something they didn't want us to know then, and with the green movement, they certainly don't want us to know now. The green movement isn't about preserving the planet. The green movement is about control. It's no more complicated than that. The next sector would be their farming sector. Once again, because of the Tigris-Euphrates River Delta, with the flow of all that silt down there, the land is very good for growing crops. In fact, it's been referred to as the Fertile Crescent for that very reason. Then we have the issue of tourism. The ancient history of Iraq rivals that of any country on the planet. The Sumerian culture goes back 4,000 years. They formed one of the first languages, cuneiform, as far back as 3,500 years. They had a very complex society. Anyone that studies history knows the history of the ziggurats, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and then there's their famous leader, Hammurabi, who created the first sophisticated civil and criminal code, which is really a prototype of the civil and criminal codes we have today. Then if we look to today itself and what's going on in the world today, Iraq possesses a strategic geopolitical and geographic import. It's a buffer between the Shia of Iran and the Sunnis of Saudi Arabia. It's the gateway between the East and the West. The Silk Road, which was initially established by Marco Polo in the 13th century, is now under the auspices of the China Bank trying to reestablish the Silk Road Initiative to create that trade route again, which goes from east and west right through Iraq in both directions. So for all of these reasons, you could argue that Iraq is one of the most, if not the most important country on the planet. Why is that important to us from our perspective of the revaluation of their currency? It doesn't seem logical to me that any other currency is going to come out of a program rate, or any currency that's been substantially devalued is going to revalue to reach Basel III compliance before Iraq. I'm not saying that that's not possible, and if it were to occur, it certainly would not affect what's going to happen with Iraq. But when you look at the sum total of everything, Iraq, in my opinion, is the linchpin financially, geopolitically, and in terms of the transition of the wealth to individuals who have assisted Iraq since 2003 to rebuild itself by investing in the country. How? By purchasing their currency, which is in a program rate. So this is all looking good. We don't know when the government will be completely formed. We don't know when the new budget will be passed. We can't say for sure whether the currency is just going to pop at its original rate or whether it's going to move from the 11.50 to 14.50 to 11.80 to 1-to-1 with the dollar and then back. But as I said, in my opinion, it's just a matter of time, and that time could be tomorrow morning. So thanks very much for listening to the call. I appreciate it. I would suggest, again, those of you calling in for the first time, go to our call of December 1st. Let me give you our contact information. You can go to our website, which is Trust with an S, unlimitedllc.com. Our email address is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc@gmail.com. Our phone service is 307-274-4122. I strongly suggest you get our no obligation package. It does contain everything you need if you should decide to establish a trust to protect your wealth and your currencies, but it has a lot of information about us, about trusts, about the currencies and their revaluation. You can contact us if you have any questions. There will be no consultation fee. Our next call is scheduled, of course, for next Wednesday. Certainly, if something of a dramatic nature were to happen between now and then, we'll try to get out an emergency email and schedule an emergency conference call. But failing that, we'll be back next Wednesday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and have a great week. Bye-bye.